everyone. Today we're going to be covering evaluating expressions when you're given replacement values for variables. So the property that allows us to work through it this way is called the substitution property. The substitution property tells me that if I have two things that are equal, so A is equal to B. If I have two things that are equal, then A can replace B in an algebraic expression. So if A and B are the same, then I can take out A and put in B anytime I need to, and vice versa. If A and B are the same, I can take out B and put in A. So I can substitute those for the other if I need to. One of the easy ways I like to think about this is with money. So I know that $1 is the same as 4 quarters. Make this easy on me. There we go. So I know that $1 is the same as 4 quarters. Well, if I want to go to the vending machine and I see that they don't take any dollars, I can give someone my dollar and they can give me 4 quarters. I don't have that dollar anymore, but I still have $1 worth of value. So the same thing is true for my variables. Sometimes A doesn't really tell me anything. So I need to switch it with something that will work. Okay, just like my vending machine didn't want to take dollars, I need to switch my dollar for something that's going to work here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the function exactly the way I see it, but I'm going to replace my variables with open parentheses. All right, so if I've got number 1, I've got AB squared plus C. So I've got my A, that's a variable, so I'm going to put parentheses there. I've got a B, another variable, so I'm going to put parentheses there too. I have my exponent, I have my plus sign, and I have my C. So I'm going to put a set of parentheses for each one of those variables. Now this is an optional step. As you get more comfortable with this and as you start to practice and as this becomes easier, you may find that you don't need to do this. But as you're starting to practice this and as this is something that's new for you, it might be in your best interest to do this so it helps keep you organized as you work through these problems. So once I have my parentheses, now I can start that substitution. So I'm going to substitute the variables for their given values. So for number 1, I have an A first. Well, they told me that A is the same as 2, so I can take out that A and put in a 2 instead. And I'm going to repeat that for all the variables in my expression. So next I have a B. They told me that B is equal to 4, so I'm going to put a 4 in that parentheses. I took out the B, I put in a 4. And same thing with my C. They told me C was equal to 7, so where that C was, I'm putting a 7 now instead. Okay? The parentheses will help keep you organized and making sure that you're only taking out the variable and only putting in their replacement value. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to simplify using the order of operations. Now, the way you learned the order of operations may be a little different. Maybe you did PEMDAS. Maybe you did GEMS or GEMDAS. But the process you should be taking is the same. So let's take 1 second to review that. So remember the order of operations. I personally like to use GEMS. So the first thing I want to do, I like to use GEMS. My G stands for groups. Remember that there are many, many, many ways to group terms together. Frequently we see parentheses, but you may also see something like brackets or fraction bars or square root symbols that have operations underneath. So the first thing I want to do is take care of anything that is grouped together. Then I'm going to take care of my exponents. My M stands for multiply or divide from left to right. Okay, you don't do all the multiplication and then all the division. We're just going to multiply or divide as we move from left to right. Same thing with my S step. S stands for subtract or add, again, left to right. Okay, so now that we've refreshed that, let's take a look back at number 1. I want to simplify this expression using my order of operations. So I don't have any groups. But Ms. Lynch, there's parentheses. You put parentheses in there. Yeah, but there's nothing to do inside those parentheses. This 2 is already as simple as I can make it. This 4 is already as simple as I can make it. This 7 is already as simple as I can make it. So within those parentheses, there is nothing to do. So I can move on to my exponents. Remember that exponents only affect what they are touching. So this 2 exponent is touching just the 4. So the 4 is the only thing that gets squared. Now, if you have Desmos, you can use Desmos to do this. I can do 4, and then right here, I have my a squared. I can click right on that. I get 4 squared, and then 16 is my value. Remember that I didn't do anything to the 2. So I'm just going to bring that down. 4 squared, I just calculated, was 16. So 4 squared becomes 16. And same thing, I didn't do anything to my plus 7, so I don't need to bring that down. Or excuse me, I need to bring that down. I don't need to do anything with it. Okay. Now I'm going to multiply or divide from left to right. So the first thing I have is my multiplication of 2 times 16, which is 32. Plus 7 is going to come down. And then I add or subtract. In this case, I'm going to add 32 plus 7 equals 39. Okay. Now, the last step that I always include is to check this. Okay, check this. Particularly because we have fancy TI graphing calculators and fancy graphing Desmos that we can use to do this. I like to take the 1 second step to make sure that I did this correctly. So, the way that we can check this, in my opinion, the simplest way, is to take this part from step 2. After you've substituted the variables for their replacement values, and just plug it, the whole thing into your calculator or into Desmos. I like to include the parentheses because it makes sure that I'm going to do this correctly. So I've got parentheses 2 that represents my A. I have my parentheses 4 that represents the B and the square that goes along with that B. Plus my C, which was 7. Again, I'm using parentheses. This tells me that my answer is 39. That's what I got here. So I'm off to a pretty good start. Let's take a look at number 2 and try another one. Again, the first thing I'm going to do is write my expression exactly the way I see it, except every time I see a variable, I'm going to replace it with a set of open parentheses. So in this expression, the first thing I see is a 3. Not a variable, it's going to stay exactly the same. Then I see an x, so I'm going to represent that with an open variable, and I got to make sure that I include my square. Okay? My minus and my 4 are parts of the problem, and then my x I can replace with open parentheses. Again, as this becomes more fluid and something that you do frequently, you may not need to take this step, but in the meantime, while we're learning and while we're practicing, it's a good way to make sure that we're staying organized. So now I can substitute. My x here, I know, is equal to -2. So I've taken out that x, and I'm going to put in -2 instead. Yep. I'm going to try to put in -2. All right. And this one is also an x, so I'm going to put -2 in there as well. Okay. Again, I don't have any groups as I start simplifying using my order of operations. There's nothing to do in this parentheses. There's nothing to do in this parentheses. Nothing else is grouped in any way, so I can just move right along to my exponents. Okay. Just like we did last time, you're welcome to use Desmos or your calculator, but be careful here when you do this -2 squared. Remember again that the variable only affects what it's touching, or excuse me, the exponent only affects what it's touching. So I'm only squaring -2. If you'd like to put the parentheses, I would highly recommend it. So parentheses -2 and square that whole thing, and I'm going to get a +4. Make sure you're being careful when you square negative numbers. Okay? The -2 is inside that parentheses, which means -2 is the number being squared. So 3 comes down. -2 squared was +4 minus 4, parentheses, -2. I haven't done anything yet to the 4 or the -2 over here, so I can bring those down. Now I'm going to multiply or divide from left to right. So the first multiplication I come across is 3 times 4, which is 12. The next set of multiplication I come by is -4 times -2. -4 times -2 is +8. And the last thing I do is add 12 plus 8 is 20. Weird 20. Again, I can check this by plugging in this substituted step right into my calculator or right into Desmos. I highly recommend that you use parentheses when you do that and that you type it exactly the way you saw it here. So I've got 3 parentheses x squared, but instead of x, I'm going to do -2 squared minus 4 parentheses -2. Okay. Remember, if you're using Desmos, that the subtraction sign and the negative sign are the same. Again, this tells me I got 20. I got 20 over here, so I've got that one right too. Let's get into some trickier ones. Number 3, I've got a squared b minus b squared. I'm going to write this exactly the way I see it, but I'm going to replace all of my variables with open parentheses. So a gets a set of parentheses. So a becomes a set of parentheses. The squared has to stay there. B becomes a set of parentheses. Minus stays there. B becomes a set of parentheses, and the squared stays as it is. So the only thing that has changed here is that each of these variables became open parentheses. Now I can start replacing. I know that a equals 3, so anywhere I see an a, I'm going to put a 3 in there. The only a's I have. And I know that b is -4. I've taken out that b. I'm going to put in -4 wherever that b was. So this b was here, so I'm going to put -4. And this b was there, so I'm going to put -4. Okay. This is where signs can start to get complicated, which is why I like to use the parentheses. So again, I don't have any groups. I can move right along to my exponents. So I've got 3 squared. I know that 3 squared is 9, but you can do that in your calculator if you need to. -4 I haven't done anything with, so it just comes down. Minus, remember that this is -4 squared. Okay? If you're confused about this or you feel like you're not super confident, make sure you just put it in your calculator. So I'm going to do -4 parentheses squared, which gives me +16. Make sure you're being careful with your signs, especially when you're squaring. This gives me +16. Okay. Now I can multiply. 9 times -4 is -36 minus 16. I can do that in my calculator. -36 minus 16 is -52. Let's check. -36. -36 minus 16 gives me -52. I still want to check my work. So I'm going to type in my substituted version. I'm going to do this version right here. So I get parentheses 3 squared. So 3 goes where it's supposed to. parentheses -4 minus parentheses -4. Okay, I can see that I got 32 in Desmos, which is not what I got here. So let's do some troubleshooting. It helps if I don't forget a whole square. Now, there we go. So I make sure I type it in. I can check to see that they match. I did get -52, which is what I got when I did it by hand as well. Okay. I'm going to look at one more tricky type before I let you guys try this on your own. So for number 4, I'm keeping everything that I see. The negative sign gets kept. The y becomes a parentheses. The subtraction sign and the 3 are kept. The x and the y each become a set of parentheses. Then I can start replacing. X is equal to -2, so anywhere I see an x, I'm going to put a -2 there. Same thing for my y, except I'm going to replace that with -12. Now I can start simplifying. Don't have anything to do inside the parentheses, so I can just start multiplying. Now this one's a little tricky because I have a negative. Okay, if you remember from middle school, a negative times a negative gives you a positive number. Okay, but also this is a -1 out here. -1 times -12. Well, -1 times -12 is +12. So that's part of my multiplication step. And then same thing here. I can do all this multiplication at the same time, or I can do it one step at a time. I can do -3 times 2 and then multiply that product by -12, or I can do them all together, particularly if I'm using Desmos or a TI calculator. So I can do -3, parentheses, -2, parentheses, -12. That's going to give me -72. For the record, it would have been the same if you did -3 times -2, which gives you -6, and then you did 6 times -12, which would also give you -72. Okay, you can do them all at once, or you can do them in pieces. 12 minus 72 is going to give me -60 for my final answer. And of course, you know, I'm going to check that in Desmos or on my TI calculator if that's what I happen to have. So I'm going to take my substituted version and I'm going to plug it in exactly the way I see it. -1, you can leave the 1 or you can leave it off like we did when we had it originally. Parentheses -12, parentheses 3, nope, -3, parentheses x, which was -2, parentheses -12. When I put all that together, I got -60, which is what I got when I did it with order of operations as well. Okay. So I want you to take a few minutes. I want you to try number 5 and number 6. The expressions they give you are the same as the ones in 3 and 4. Okay, so double check, make sure you're setting this up correctly. Try it, work it out, check it in Desmos. Then come back here and compare your answers with my answers. All right, for number 5, you should have gotten -161. For number 6, you should have gotten 22. You can check both of those with Desmos or in your calculator. So make sure if you have questions about those, you bring them to class. Now, these can get a little more complicated, but the process generally stays the same. So let's look at one like number 1. So now we're going to look at a few that are a little more complicated, but the process is generally the same. So I'm going to write my expression, and I'm going to replace all of the variables with parentheses. So I've got 2j plus j minus 2k. I'm going to fill in those variables with their replacement values. So everywhere I have a j, I'm going to put a -1. And everywhere I have a k, I'm going to put 5 halves. Don't let the fact that that's a fraction freak you out. because the process for using 5/2 is the same as the process for using any other number. If you're using Desmos, you can represent that 5/2 as 5/2 or 5 divided by 2, and that'll set it up for as a fraction for you. So remember, I'm still going to follow my order of operations. I'm going to do groups, exponents, multiply or divide from left to right, and add or subtract from left to right. So I don't have any groups, nothing to do inside my parentheses. I don't have any exponents either, so I can roll right into that multiplication. 2 times -1 is -2. I'm going to bring down this plus -1. If you want to write that as -1, that's okay. I'm going to keep it the same. Then I've got -2 times 5/2. Again, you can do this in Desmos. -2, parentheses, 5 divided by 2 to make that fraction. And it tells me that that answer is going to be -5. Now I just have to add or subtract from left to right. 2 times -2 plus -1 is -3, minus 5. -3 minus 5 is -8. I can check that in Desmos by plugging in my whole replacement value, my whole expression with the replacement values to double check that answer. Number 3. A squared plus b squared over a minus b, and I'm going to replace those with their respective values. So for everywhere I see an a, I'm going to put in -3, so 1 here and 1 there. For every b, I'm going to put in -4, 1 there and 1 there. Now this one's a little bit trickier, because as I start working through the order of operations, I have to recognize the fact that each of these, the numerator, the top part of the fraction, and the denominator, really is a group. So I want to simplify this first, then simplify the bottom, and then divide. So within each of those, I'm going to follow my order of operations again. So I've got an exponent, -3 squared. -3 squared is equal to 9. Make sure you're putting the -3 inside parentheses when you're calculating that. Plus -4 squared is +16. Again, make sure the -4 is in parentheses. And then -3 minus -4, I'm just going to leave the way it is for now. Okay, if you'd like to simplify that, you're welcome to. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. So I'm going to do 9 plus 16. 9 plus 16 gives me 25. -3 minus -4 is going to give me 7. Nope. -3 minus -4 is going to give me 1, And we know 25 divided by 1, I simplified the top, simplified the bottom. Now I can divide. 25 divided by 1 is 25. Okay, so that's part of your grouping step, is to make sure that this group is simplified and this group is simplified, and then you can do that division. 2 more quick ones. So I've got x squared minus 2x minus y. Remember that these parentheses that are already here need to stay here. They are part of the problem. And then when I replace my x with those parentheses, that's another set. And when I replace my y with parentheses, that's another set. Be careful of those double parentheses. Okay, so I've got my x. X is equal to 2, so everywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug that in. And my y is equal to -2, so that's going to go there. This one I do have a group. This parentheses is a group first, so everything else stays the same. 2 squared comes down, minus 2 comes down, and then I evaluate on the inside. 2 minus -2 is 4. You can do that in your calculator. Now I can do my exponents and my multiplication. So 2 squared is 4. Everything else comes down. -2 times 4 is -8. So 4 minus 8, which is going to give me -4 as my answer. Even with the tons of parentheses, you can check this in Desmos. So I'm just going to type in that step, parentheses, 2, close it squared, minus 2, parentheses, parentheses. Remember the parentheses that were already there are these ones. And then I have my secondary parentheses where I'm going to put my x and my y. So I've got 2 for my x, minus -2 for my y. The parentheses that was already there needs to stay there. And my final answer is -4, which checks out with what I did. Do one more, and then you'll be able to try this on your own. The parts of my expression that need to stay the same. The minus, a becomes parentheses, squared, -2. These are absolute value symbols. It may have been a while since you've seen these, but these straight up and down bars mean absolute value. Okay. Remember that the absolute value is defined mathematically as a number's distance from 0. So if I have something like the absolute value of 5, if I'm looking at a number line, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces from 0. So the absolute value of 5 is 5. But remember that this distance is going to stay positive. So if I want the absolute value of, let's say, -2, there's -2. Well, it's 1, 2 spaces. So the absolute value is 2. Okay, remember absolute value, the answers of an absolute value are always positive. So I'm going to keep that absolute value symbol because it's there. I'm going to put in parentheses for my b, plus the 3 that's there, and the closing absolute value bar. Now I can plug in like I've been doing. A is -2. B is 4. Now, remember that absolute value signs are a group. So that's the first thing that I want to take care of. I'm going to leave everything else the way it is for the moment. This is the absolute value of 4 plus 3, which is 7. Okay? And the absolute value of 7 is 7, so that's going to stay the same. Now I can do my exponents. Remember that this minus sign or this negative sign out front is not part of my exponents. Okay? Remember that the 2 only affects what it's touching. It's only touching that -2, so that's all I'm going to do. Everything else stays the same. -2 squared, make sure you're including that parentheses, is +4, -2, absolute value of 7. The absolute value of 7 is 7, so you can change that to parentheses 7 if you want. I'm going to multiply, -4, -2 times 7 is -14, -4 minus 14 is -18. I can check this in Desmos. The absolute value sign is this symbol right here. Okay, it's the button with the 2 vertical lines and the A in the middle. So with that knowledge, I can type in that step. So I've got, make sure you can see it. Right, so I've got negative, parentheses -2 squared, minus 2, absolute value, parentheses 4, close them, plus 3, and I get -18. Okay, so what I want you to do is to try numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8 on this page. Okay, they should be very similar to the ones next to them, so if you have some trouble, look back at the examples. And then when you're all finished, come back here and check your answers against my answers. All right, check your answers for number 2 and number 4. And then I'm going to show you really quickly how to check number 4 in Desmos. I don't think I covered that when we did number 3, so I want to talk about that really quickly. In Desmos, if the first thing you press is the division symbol, it will set you up with a fraction. Okay? If the first thing you press is the division symbol, it will set you up with a fraction. So now I can start putting in this step. So I'm going to do parentheses 3 squared plus parentheses 5 squared. And then on the bottom, I'm going to do 3 in parentheses minus 5 in parentheses. And I get that negative 17 that checks out over here. Okay, so again, if you just press this division symbol before you put anything else in, it will set you up with a fraction that you can then type into. Then go ahead and check number 6 and 8. Number 6 is going to be 23. Number 8 is going to be negative 13. Make sure you write down any questions you have and bring them with you to class.